I want to be noticed. I want to be seen. I want my experience to be known. I often don't feel like my parents really understand why I do what I do. There's something really beautiful about using art in the way that Rach has as well, with writing as a way of discovering yourself and discovering who you are and why that matters.
When you're in development and you're writing your show, just know that the why that you find or the why that you bring to the writing is so important, because it will be the thing that you hold on to for the whole experience. If you feel really strongly and confident about your connection to the story, you'll always have that.
There are points where a producer can choose between the option that's better for the budget and the option that is better for all of the humans that we're working with. And we, every time, would go for the humans.
Hello and welcome to We Interrupt This Broadcast for another deep dive episode. My name's Loani Arman and my guests today are Rachel Maxine Anderson and Rae Choi, who collaborated on Ina, a 6-part short form series that recently premiered at Canneseries, is available now to watch for free on YouTube, and has amassed an active fan base across its socials, with some clips hitting millions of views. They're here to talk about how they pulled it off on a series that nobody greenlit but themselves. Rae and Rachel, welcome to the podcast.
Hello.
Thank you for having us. Hi, Loani.
It's so good to see you both. I loved Ina so much. It's such a gorgeous authored piece that feels really designed for the online environment. Rachel, you created the series and you wrote and directed all 6 episodes. What is the series about for you?
Ina is an online series about Madeline, who is a half Filipino cooking show producer. She's got this cooking show. It's on the brink of being cancelled. And on the morning of her shoot, she loses her guest chef. And in an attempt to save the shoot, save the day, she ropes in the Filipino studio cleaner to fill in for her, who happens to be her mother. Things go from bad to worse, but ultimately these two women are forced to face each other and all the reasons why they've drifted apart. And it asks the question, will they heal or will their relationship go up in flames? You know, as a mixed race Filipino Australian, my mum's Filipino, and my journey's very much been about reconnecting to myself through my relationship with her, but also finding my own relationship to my culture. That's ultimately what the series is about.
With all of that in mind, at what point did you decide that part of your lived experience needed to become a story for the screen?
It's a really weird thing to be navigating life and feeling like you don't quite clearly understand all the different parts of yourself. There was always something that felt really disconnected. And I think that was my relationship to being Filipino, because I watched my mum assimilate as I was growing up. I was essentially taught by my environment that assimilating was going to be the best thing for me. And that sense of connection was either never learnt or it was forgotten along the way. It was actually very cathartic writing this show and tapping into Madeline, because Madeline is ultimately a big part of me. It was really cool to be able to put somebody like her on screen in all her flaws and her really unsteadily taking the steps to understanding herself.
I really connected to that, what that assimilation process can do to someone's connection to identity, but then also coming back later in life to reconnect and to try to find your way, owning all that it is, like owning that process and understanding it and having sympathy for it. I thought it was so beautifully reflected between Madeline and her relationship with her mum. It was so beautifully crafted. Rae, you were one of the producers across the series with your company, Limina Pictures, alongside Danielle Redford's Contra Pictures. Take me back to the first conversation you had with Rachel about Ina, and I'm curious, at what point did you say, this is a project that's worth backing?
Absolutely. I was drawn to being involved with Ina first and foremost because Rach is such a dear friend of mine, and this was a story that I knew came so deep from within her. And I wanted to be part of bringing that out and sharing that with the world. And having had my own experience as a writer and director, I felt that compulsion so deeply and that desire in a way that I really wanted to be able to go on that journey with Rach. And diaspora stories, in my experience, have often tried to cater to making it palatable and accessible for a mainstream audience. But what I love about Inner and the way that Rach's access point for it is so specific and deeply emotionally authentic, it means that you're not trying to explain it to anyone. Maddie and Gloria and their relationship, it's not about the fact that we're making a series that's about Filipino-Australian mother and daughter, but it's their relationship and it's the context of them being Filipino and it's the workplace culture that they're in.
Even in my own experience as a filmmaker who's really struggled with connecting to identity or feeling like I've got an authorship over it, there can be a fear to tell stories from culture that you'll get it wrong, or there's a responsibility to sort of cover all, or that someone closer to that culture will call you out for not getting it right. Did you ever feel a sense of that? Because I feel like it's such a common experience in stories that come from the diaspora.
Yeah, I think I always knew growing up that there was something, I guess, unique or less understood, I suppose, about my experience. I grew up wanting to feel seen and understood. But I think that as I started emerging into the industry, I actually had other people in the industry telling me that I was a person of color or that I was Asian, or just being really curious about that Filipino side of me. I felt this confusion because I remember being like, am I a person of color? Because I'd never identified that way, or I didn't know I was allowed to belong to something in that way. I think that is the mixed race experience of not feeling like you quite belong here, but you don't quite belong there, and you're stuck in this in between. As I was developing my voice as a filmmaker, trying to tell the story of my experience and my unique perspective, there was always this sense of insecurity or falseness that was popping up for me, trying to tap into the story of being Filipino or having my mum be my mum or being mixed race, this feeling like you don't know what you're talking about or you don't have the authority to tell this kind of story. As we were in development for Inner, I kind of made that realization that that was the place that I should have been coming from, is this feeling of not being enough, of not understanding yourself enough, of feeling disconnected, of feeling stuck in between two spaces. I can't tell you how grateful I am that I was able to realize these things about myself through making the project.
It echoes so much of my own experience. I remember having an early conversation in my career with Katrina Irawati Graham and her saying she was decolonizing her stories and decolonizing her life. And I remember I'm just blown away by this conversation. It makes me so grateful for this gift that we have to tell stories, to keep us connected to our identity. Rae, I'd be curious from your perspective too, what working across stories from the diaspora has taught you about yourself.
For me, there's something about growing up feeling like to belong is to assimilate and to be quiet and keep your head down and don't be noticed. I really loved this podcast episode I listened to years ago with Ocean Vuong, where he speaks to having this experience of growing up where you're raised in a world that asks you to keep your head down, and your parents have sacrificed so much in order for you to be in this world that asks you to assimilate. So you go, okay, to honor that sacrifice of your parents, I should do the same thing. But there's something that is rising up inside you as an artist that asks something different of you, which is, I want to be noticed. I want to be seen. I want my experience to be known. And in order to do that, you have to put your head up. You have to speak to that. And that's really scary. For them, it might seem like you're throwing away, all their sacrifice, and they dream for you to thrive in a different way. But actually, you are living their dream. And that was something that was really powerful for me when I heard those words, because I often don't feel like my parents really understand why I do what I do. I've tried to arrive at some peace around that, because I think in a way that they might not quite understand just yet, I think I am living their dream, because I've chosen this path for myself. And there's something really beautiful at using art in the way that Rach has as well, with writing as a way of discovering yourself and discovering who you are and why that matters as, people of color or part of the diaspora, where we want to see our stories on screen. And so we are asked to tell those stories, but that's such a huge responsibility that's often felt and placed on our shoulders to represent what really is many, many, many different stories. And so I think the best way to honor that is to tell our own and what we know and be as specific as possible.
Can we talk, please, about food? Because this series made me so hungry. You've built the whole story around a cooking show.
I just didn't think I could tell a story about my mum without it being about food. Food has always been a source of love and connection between my mum and I. The Hello Hello was a bit of a discovery for me. I was sort of like thinking about the story and thinking about Filipino food. I watched one documentary, an American doco, and they did a segment on Hello Hello, and they were bouncing through like the history of the dish and all the different colonial influences, the Spanish influence, the American influence, and how it originated from a Japanese dish. It was wild to me because I was like, whoa, so many people had to die for this dish to exist. Like so much trauma, so much pain. And that pain is carried by my mother, by my grandparents, because they watched and grew up with so much loss and war, and it just made me realize like so much of that history also had to happen for me to exist as well. I just thought it was so strange that a dish would exist through war and trauma, but also through assimilation as well, because Filipinos were taught to be like an American, and the American cornflakes get sprinkled on the top of the dish. It's just a dish that there's a lot more to it than meets the eye. Like there's all these like different sweet things mixed up in a glass. It's like a bit of a sweet mess. That's where sweet mess comes from. But it's special exactly as it is. It's Hello Hello. It makes people happy. They're proud of it despite all the things that have happened in the past for it to exist. So it was like helping me reframe the way I saw myself as well, because I'm mixed up. I'm enough as I am, and I taste good.
Do you know what I love about that story, apart from the very comedic tag at the end? What I love about that story is I could sense it in the writing that was a discovery for you. That's how much the lived experience or the immediacy of that learning felt in this script. So let's go to the structure of this series. It's so contained. You've spoken to that being creatively driven, but I'm curious, we're in an online space where the budgets are notoriously tight. From a budget perspective, was that also a key driver to keeping it so contained?
Absolutely. There was a world where this project was a long form series, and when we talked about making it a short form to be able to make it more quickly and do it in a way that protected Rachel's authorship of it, both as a writer but also director, we went, okay, this is the kind of budget we can possibly get. Let's work smarter, not harder, about how we can make that money work for us. And so a big part of that was, and this is a hard-earned learning, making short form and short films, for example. I've been very greedy at times in my own shorts of trying to fit too many locations into a short amount of time. And in a way, I've paid the cost of that creatively as a writer and director, realizing on set I have less time to do the work I want to be doing with what I have. And so we were like, let's really maximize that so that Rach has more room to play with all the cast and diving in deeply emotionally into scenes. Let's really try to make this just one location. We all know that there's so much creativity that can boil up from limitations.
Condensing it down, these characters, the world, into a short form did feel really challenging. But then, like Rae said, like there's so much creativity that can come from that sense of containment. I was able to take the same characters or similar characters and drop them into this environment. And I think the nature of like the claustrophobia or the closeness of like being stuck in one place, especially, it all being set across one shoot day as well, just added so much like juice to the writing process, because, you know, I had these characters that had been developed and then was able to just kind of like drop the audience into a world. I love those kind of stories where, you know, you're kind of like dropped into a space and you just have to sort of like figure out where you are. It was fun to just be able to like have a world, have these relationship dynamics, and then start there from the pilot.
There's something as well about the walk and talk workplace show, the energy of that we were leaning into, which is just part of the cooking show, the production world, that I think works really well as well for the format and for the kind of audience that tunes into work online. You know, there's like a pacing to that. There's an energy, I guess, what made Inner what it is and so wonderful on all the levels that we both were reaching for, but also have been surprised by pleasantly, has been this bringing together of all these elements that just work so beautifully. The energy of a show in this workplace that we're set in, because food is so important, and also, you know, how do we get our families to understand who we are when film and TV and this industry is so much a part of who we are. It's like, imagine if they could see us in our workplace. And I think it's just so brilliant the way that Rach has brought all these things together in order to kind of force that into a reckoning. And I think that is the enticing premise, I suppose, of what pulls people into watching.
Those circumstances also really make Madeline suffer more as well, because she's like trapped in this place with like her mum and like all her work colleagues. She learns that the higher exec is visiting set later that day. We're with her like across the single shoot day. So it like kind of ratchets up as she's getting more and more stressed across the day. I think these choices really helped us lean into the urgency and the stress and the suffering we put her through. That really lent itself to the short form format as well, because it could have this sense of energy and tension as well. When we were shooting, we were like in this bubble and we could pre-light the studio. That really helped us with our tight schedule, and it really freed us up with like blocking, and the actors really felt at home in the environment as well, because it was like everywhere you looked was the world, because it didn't matter if the camera was over there. Like everywhere you looked, it kind of felt like the spell wasn't broken because we were just in their space in that way. And I think it empowered them to be really flowing with their instincts, and that really like helped with the blocking process. I really love trusting my actors. Obviously you cast in a way that allows you to be able to do that, but we were just so blessed with such talented, incredible people who were just so willing to just play and be generous and really respectful of each other as well. And I felt really safe too. Like I even had a moment where I cried a little, because there's an episode we were shooting that was Gloria, Madeline's mother in the show, telling a story that's actually a true story from my childhood. And it just really hit me, and I just cried for a bit. And everyone was cool with that. And then I just gathered myself and we just kept working. And I didn't even feel weird about that. I didn't feel ashamed about it. I didn't feel like I was less good at my job for that. I was just like at home with these people, and it really goes to show like the way we crewed and casted. And Danielle and Rae were so amazing when it came to handpicking people and making sure we were having people on board who could be a part of that beautiful alchemy. So yeah, it really starts from the top.
There must have been such a sense of safety and trust across that set that not only came from people's investment in story and their care for that story, but from you, Rae, and Danielle as producers. What did it take to nurture that level of safety amongst cast and crew?
The core team that we had in Rach, Danielle, myself, our executive producer, Karen, we all are such deeply caring people, both about the work we do, but also as humans, and take such pride in that. There are points where a producer can choose between the option that's better for the budget and the option that is better for the humans that we're working with. And we every time would go for the humans. Not only does that investment make us feel better as humans ourselves and mean that we could go to bed and sleep better at night knowing that, but also that investment goes into the project ultimately. Something that came up for me, which is a thought I haven't really had before when you were speaking earlier, Rach, was that alchemy. I think a big part of the alchemy of our series and the way we made it was that because it had this meta component, it meant that we actually were surrounded by experts in a lot of ways. So, for example, we had Nettie, who plays our hair and makeup artist, but we had Jennifer, our hair and makeup artist. So if we ever needed to ask her a question like, oh, what's the best way to apply something, or, we needed something, we could always ask our crew. And we also had Charisse, who was our food stylist, who's also ended up playing Lily, who's a food tech chef, food stylist on the show as well. So having that sort of interplay meant that I think our crew felt more invested, and we empowered them to speak up if there was anything that they noticed was not quite authentic or could be more specific, or there was this beautiful sort of interweaving of worlds, both in story but also our lived experience as filmmakers and doing this every day.
Yeah, even that direct reflection of how stressful those environments can be. To be crew on a project where you feel yourself reflected in that way must have been such a treat. Just thinking to what you were both saying, and knowing that this series originally was a long form, which would have meant you would have had to have gone to a commissioner or a broadcaster or a streamer. The agency that you've both expressed across the project, do you think that is the benefit of working in this online space? Like, has that been a real plus to not wait for the green light, not wait for that permission, but to take ownership of it?
Yeah, 100%. We had stakeholders. We had Screen Australia and Screen Queensland, and they give notes and thoughts, and we take them on board and we consider them as part of our process. But there was so much freedom in the way that we wanted to go about it creatively, but also in the marketing of it. And it was great to have their support and be able to lean into their expertise and their investment in us and the project, but also be able to try things out and experiment, especially when it came to the way that we ended up marketing the series. I suppose, in a more traditional sense, you would create a show and you'd have a commissioner on board and they are responsible for marketing the series. While you might hand over assets to do that, they're still primarily leading that. And there's something about that feels so disconnected from the actual work that we make. I want to be part of the way that audiences find the work that we put our heart and souls into. And that level of care that has been given into the actual project itself should be given as well into the way that you're reaching audiences. I don't think I could have had that kind of experience if we felt like there were all these steps that we had to take in order to get approvals or feedback or, just being able to work more quickly in that way.
How about for you, Rachel? Was that something that you were aware of in the process of making the show, or did that come as an afterthought? Was audience present throughout?
As I was writing the show, I was able to consider certain things, knowing it was going to be in the online space because of my mum. Like, my mum is an iPad girl. She watches YouTube on her iPad. She loves a romance. She loves a will they, won't they. I knew she was going to love Bobby and Maddie. I knew that Gloria messing up, but then ultimately speaking up for herself was going to, make her cackle. I knew the show was going to make her cry. I was just thinking about her, to be honest, like when I was writing it. And I think that was like the only thing I really felt like I had because of that disconnection to community. I'm just like amazed seeing the YouTube comments and, the positive feedback where people are saying, like Filipino people are saying how authentic certain things feel. And it's like, my gosh, like my experience translates to other people, and not just Filipino people, but people who have migrated to a new country and have felt really lost or people who are mixed race and are trying to understand themselves have really seen parts of themselves in Maddie and in the show. It was just really exciting though, knowing that there's a lot of like Filipino content on YouTube that my mum watches. And there's of course an audience there. And we knew we'd be able to reach our audience from YouTube. There's no paywall, like it's accessible. You can watch it wherever you are. It's like accessible to community. And that's been such a empowering thing as a filmmaker, to make something for somebody and for them to be able to find it, or for the show to find them. And I think as well, I always have had this dream of like making shows. I saw myself working in TV as a writer director. An earlier version of me thought that the online space was a stepping stone towards that. But there's something about this experience that has made me really go, like, an online series is its own incredible format, and it should be seen that way. Why do we love filmmaking? Because we are audience. Like, we grew up as little people watching shows and watching TV and feeling connected, watching cinema and feeling connected to ourselves and feeling seen. And you can do that in the online space. I think it's just so incredibly exciting.
Yeah. As someone who's worked quite a lot in that short form online space, I wholeheartedly agree with you. You get to protect your relationship with audience so much more closely. There also is a whole lot of work that goes into finding that audience and keeping them engaged. So I'm curious to talk a little bit about strategy. When you talk about marketing the project, what does that mean? And for our listeners out there, what are some really key learnings that they can latch on to?
We aren't experts in this space at all. So for us, it was an experiment. We created our own channel, which in its own way, we were aware came with some risks around discoverability. We didn't have an existing audience to be able to tap and go, hey, watch this new thing that we've just made. So starting a brand new channel on YouTube, starting a brand new profile on Instagram and TikTok. From there, we just worked really hard to do what we could to reach the audiences in a way that felt honest and true to what we were making. What's really worked really well, and I know that Elise Adams spoke to this in an earlier episode of this podcast, is clipping. And we worked closely with Elise on our marketing of the series. And clipping works so well because you're using the show itself to actually promote it. Vertical snippets of juicy moments in episodes that people can latch onto with a bit of a pithy caption, and also captions that you can read, so that for those who may be watching it on the commute or for accessibility reasons as well, make it easier to understand what's going on. The algorithm might just send it their way, fingers crossed. And then when they watch it, they go, oh, this looks really interesting. And then it takes them over to thinking about watching the whole series, or at least that episode. And something that we found, especially from reading the comments on our YouTube channel, people actually have come over to watch the show on YouTube from having come across it on TikTok and Instagram. We can see from our analytics on YouTube that people are discovering Inner have come to the series from just searching into the search tab in our series, that they've gone specifically looking for it, which is amazing that people are that motivated to go finding it themselves. Something that was really interesting to us early on was one of our first clips on Instagram and TikTok that went viral, I suppose, because we hit millions of views so quickly. We were like, what's going on here? Why did this one draw so much attention more than other clips that we've dropped? It was the hook at the very end of episode 1. Naturally, a hook is hooky because that's the way it was written, and that's what we hoped people would watch and then go, oh, I want to watch episode 2 now. So of course that ended up being the clip that makes people go, oh, I want to see what happens next, or I want to see what this is all about. So that was really cool.
Being a little unafraid of what you're giving away to an audience and being really generous in giving them enough story that hooks them in. It potentially spoils a little moment, but trusting that there's so much more to the series.
We talked a lot about not giving away spoilers, and that was something that we worried about. We felt kind of precious, and there was something that Elise said to us early on was there is no such thing as spoilers on the online space. Really, our goal is to get them there and then just trust that what we've made will hold them. And I think that has proven to be true.
For you, Rachel, in building out that world, how much of that social campaign were you a part of in terms of driving the creative direction? Some of those videos almost felt like fan edits. Like it felt like there was such an adoring lens on those videos. How much were you driving that?
We had this incredible editor, Lissy Ann, who made these fan edits for the show. Tonally, there's like such a like deep emotional undercurrent, but there's also something playful and fun about the premise, about the environment. And there was something about having this like external lens that she was looking through where she could like make choices that I wasn't being precious about. We were looking at what songs were trending on TikTok, and Lysiane would use that as the song for the fan edit, and that would mean we could potentially get some more eyeballs. She's just so talented as an editor. I think there's something about when you're like the creator of something and you're so close to it, when you have like these external creatives bringing something like a fan edit to the piece that in isolation is really fun and cool and different to the show, but also shakes hands with it as well. That was a really cool approach and a really great idea from the team. It was fun to see people come through from watching those, especially in the TikTok space.
It's so smart. It's such a confident take on social strategy that it wasn't beautifully manicured trailers that you so often see to promote a show, that it felt like there was such a confidence to go, here's a clip, here's a fan edit. And how you know it worked is that the commentary underneath is so rife. People were so engaged with that content.
Initially, fan edits took me a moment to get my head wrapped around it, because I think how they first began was literally big Hollywood blockbuster movie get made, and fans would get so excited that they would make their own edit and cut down of the trailer. So at first I was like, this doesn't make sense because we are dropping it on our own platform. It's not really a true fan edit because we also haven't released all the episodes yet. And it was a curious thing for me to realize that the online space and the people who are on Instagram and TikTok, certain styles of editing, people just tune into that and are so hungry for it because they have become so versed in it. Maybe we will get a true fan edit. That would be amazing. But rather than wait for that, it was really fun to generate our own, and each one so thoughtfully offers a glimpse into what the show can give you. We had one about food and the mother-daughter relationship. And so, of course, there were going to be certain audiences that go, hey, that's the kind of show I want to watch. And there's others that are, far more moody and angsty. I guess it was a really interesting exercise in thinking about who our audience are and how can we tap into each of them in different ways. And I guess just broadly with the marketing visual style of it all, like that was something we're thinking about really early on. But with the Instagram, for example, we didn't have a team on board at that point. It was really up to us, our little team, to kind of build that up. And it was really leaning into the actual aesthetic of the show and wanting that to be cohesive, because I think there's something subliminally that people will pick up on when there's a cohesion to the visual aesthetic.
This episode of We Interrupt This Broadcast is sponsored by Getty Images, home to market-leading creative and editorial content from the world's best photographers and videographers. Getty Images is a trusted partner and creative advisor to media and production companies and YouTube native studios, offering over 37 million footage clips, including video from a range of world-renowned broadcast, studio, filmmaker, and archive partners. If you're looking for historical, contemporary, or creative footage, head to gettyimages.com to find out more.
For any other creative teams that are looking to work in the online space to deliver series content as intimately and as closely to audiences as you have, as the inner team have, but what's a big juicy piece of advice you could offer them?
I think trusting audiences, especially for a show like Inna, what we learned was we were dropping episodes every few days, and that meant that there was a bit of a wait on, what's next. People's relationship and understanding of Maddie, our main character, around episode 2 and 3 was rocky and rough, and some people were less generous than others. And it was really amazing to see their understanding of the character grow as episodes kept dropping, and even seeing people who were leaving comments at the end of episode 2 and 3 coming back at 4 and 5 and 6 going, oh, we get her now, makes sense. And I guess we went through the roller coaster of reading those comments and going, oh, like, they don't really get it, it's not working. But then realizing that, of course, this is episodic storytelling. They are reacting to something. They feel strongly about the characters in the world, and that's amazing. And so trusting that audiences want to go on that journey and deserve to go on that journey, rather than kind of giving it to them all and just needing that to be this sort of even-keeled experience. It's really amazing to have experienced that.
Yeah, I think it can be really vulnerable work to like release something out into the world, especially into the online space where people have the keyboard at their fingertips. They can say whatever. You have to sit in the tension as well of your audience, being vocal about how things are kind of sitting with them. Something I wish I could have said to myself when I was like struggling with that a little bit is like, just stick with it, stay strong. It's very different to release work in that way. Everyone is just saying whatever's coming to their mind. And something that I've realized is there's something so immediate about receiving comments in that way. It doesn't take much for someone to write a comment, but when it lands with you in a way that maybe pulls an insecurity or makes you feel like you don't have the authority to tell your story for some reason, just know that the nature of releasing your work in that way is so different to, sitting in an audience in a screening, for example, where people are having these thoughts or feelings. It takes a second for somebody to digest something and to truly taste something. Have faith in your own work and the story that you've told, because when it's finally out, that's the true message that you're delivering. And if you can have confidence and really believe in the story that you're telling, just know that once it's all out there, then you can just have that faith in it finding the right people and it resonating with people in a genuine way. I think the other thing I would say that's probably more important is when you're in development and you're writing your show, just know that the why that you find or the why that you bring to the writing is so important, because it will be the thing that you hold on to for the whole experience. Like, it could be 2 years that you're sitting with this story, with these characters. And if you can, the earlier you can find that thing that is like really the heart of the story, and it needs to be in your heart as well, you will always have that. I don't know if that feels really like vague, but just if you feel really strongly and confident about your connection to the story, you'll always have that.
I'd love to know, did you watch the series with your mum?
We did it the weekend before we were having our cast and crew screening, because she was coming to that as well. And I wanted to give her a chance to watch the whole thing in private. Ultimately, it's a love letter to her from me, or to us and our community from me. So I was really excited about that, but I was also really nervous about how certain things would land, especially because so much of it is so personal. And in the final episode, Madeline says some really honest things that feel brutal to me. When you immortalize an argument by putting it on YouTube and like you can't take those words back, I was kind of worried about that moment in time. But when Mum watched it, she was so engaged. I love just like sitting on the couch, like watching her face, smiling when Gloria's like being cheeky, or cackling when like she was like a fish out of water trying to like, rehearse for the cooking show. Bobby coming on screen and her being like, oh, I like him. Like all the things I knew she would do and say, and the way she like cheered her on. And it was like almost like Gloria was like an external part of herself that she got to see do things that she hasn't been able to do, or say things that she maybe hasn't developed a sense of language to say. And then in the final episode, when Maddie and Gloria are having this argument, Mum turned to me, I think, knowing that certain things felt true for us. She started crying and I like slid closer and put my arm around her. But it was just all love. I think she did feel really seen by the show. I know she's watched that shit a million times on her iPad.
Do you feel more specifically as well, she feels more seen by you?
I guess maybe privately I've been processing or working through certain understandings about our relationship, about her, about myself. I'm not going to be like, hey, mum, this is the conversation I just had with my therapist about you. Like, like instead I'm like putting it into a show in a way that feels objective or thoughtful. And she's experiencing that version of it, you know, something that feels filtered, but also like comes from a place of love, truth, but love ultimately. So it felt nice to finally like share something with her that I've been sort of like privately working on for so long. We had a really amazing conversation after we watched it together about assimilation and about what it was like growing up for me and for her. And, you know, what was really like amazing was I asked mum, like, mum, do you see me as Filipino? And she said, I'm sorry, but I don't. You've always been Australian to me. And I was like, oh, okay. But then I was telling her about how I felt and what motivated me to write this story and about how confused I felt growing up and everything. And her words were, I've always seen you as Australian, but I don't want to erase you. So if you feel like you are Filipino, then that's how I'll see you. And that was just really amazing to hear from her. And we wouldn't have had that conversation without me making two characters have a fight that I didn't feel like having.
I was really close to my grandmother when I was young, and she couldn't speak English. And so I'm sure my first language was probably Mandarin because that's all she could speak. But she stopped speaking to me in like her own language because she was worried that I would become different to other people at school and growing up, that I would start to feel like I didn't belong. And so I'm just thinking, is there a part of your mum that might have seen you as Australian because she wanted you to feel like you belonged here and didn't want you to feel different? And that comes from a place of love, but also comes from a place of not being afraid of that messiness, I suppose, which is why we are so drawn to telling stories and living in the space of mess, is that we are wanting to make sense of the confusion that we grew up with.
That's also where the window metaphor comes from in the show, that ended up being a visual motif as well, is like when you let somebody become something else, they can get further and further away from you. Maddie's watching her mum on the control room monitors, and then finally they're face to face with no barrier in between them, the final episode, so that they can finally like connect and really see each other in that way.
I want to go to your festival success. Did you have a festival strategy for this?
I feel like it's always been a dream that something that you make will be premiered in a major festival. And so, of course, that was something for us early on with Inner that we were striving towards. The recognition of it all was amazing. So amazing. I think there was something about it that we couldn't quite wrap our heads around at first. There was a strategy around which festivals we submitted to, and we submitted to Canneseries and Series Mania, and we would have gone for some American festivals as well, except that our timing with where we were at in post-production didn't quite line up. And so we were, just so thrilled that Canneseries loved Inner. I don't know if it's necessarily brought us more audience specifically, because I think the YouTube audience doesn't necessarily care about that. But I think what it's done is build a profile for us within the industry, and maybe it's helped then connect to an Australian audience potentially. That might have a bit of a flow-on effect. Ultimately, I suppose there's been a lot of goals that we've been carrying for Inner, and one of them is definitely creating work that we're proud of and reaching an audience that we made this for. Like Rach made this for her mum and wanted her mum to be able to watch something like this, and so that's been amazing. And then also, of course, for our careers. So we arrived the day before the festival started, and we saw them putting up the sign and rolling out the pink carpet. And there's something about that just really, of course, highlighted the showiness of it all. You know, this is a production like anything else. And there's something about movie magic that, of course, is what makes it so glamorous and enticing and enthralling, but it's also manufactured in a way. And there was a bit of a dissonance around that for us that we were sort of experiencing. It's amazing to be in a place like can with work that's been selected. But that's not why we do what we do. Why we do what we do is actually so much deeper within us. And it's not about getting that photo on the pink carpet and doing press interviews, as much as that is also really important. It's all the sides of the work. And it was just really amazing at this point in our careers to have that experience and be able to hold on to that as I suppose, a cornerstone or like a reference point for what success is and isn't, I suppose.
It was our first time screening any of the show with an audience, and to watch that with an international audience around us and to feel their response to it. I mean, honestly, they didn't laugh as much as I thought they would, but there was one moment where it was like between Maddie and Bobby where he was flirting with her and was like, I just want to make a good impression with your mum. And they all laughed. There was a rumble in the audience. That translated this like, will they, won't they? Personally, I felt a bit like I didn't quite know my place. Like I was like, oh, I'm just a girl from Australia. I felt like constantly discombobulated. I didn't know where I was always meant to be. Sometimes I was like late or like, oh shit, I was meant to be at that thing. But then when we screened, that was the most calm I had felt up until that point. I was just really excited to finally screen it. What's been the most incredible thing, regardless of where we have been, whether it be online or at our cast and crew screening or at Canneseries, is when someone genuinely says how much they love the show and they start talking about their mum or their culture, and it just feels like so authentic that it has resonated with them. That is why we do what we do. And to feel that from the jury was the ultimate thing. We didn't need the award. We didn't need to win. It was like just to really see that it hit with these people who were like literally speaking French, like trying to tell me this.
When we were at the wrap party and I went up to them just to thank them for considering our show, and they were like, oh, you're from Inner? And they just wrapped me with the biggest hug and wanted to tell Rach the same thing. So I got Rach to come back to the party to hear it herself. Yeah, you could hear the fight that they had for it and the love for it. Our first 2 episodes combined are about 15 minutes long, whereas there were some shows in our competition that were 25-minute long episodes each. And so we were just screen time alone, kind of, there was a bit of a uphill battle in that front. But so amazing that we could achieve what we did with the time. It's just like so amazing to us to realize how powerful that can be and affecting.
Rae and Rachel, we love to end our episodes when we interrupt this broadcast by asking each of our guests what their big idea for the future of the Australian screen industry is. I'll throw to you, Rae. What's your big idea?
There's a lot of talk around, especially recently, it feels like bringing audience strategy into the creative process of developing a project and scripting it. But something that occurred to me recently is reframing that just ever so slightly and going, what about the creative into the marketing? What if we gave the same level of care and intentionality and playful, idea generating that we throw around when it comes to talking about story and character beats and arcs? What if we gave that same kind of energy towards the way that we actually think about reaching audiences? There's many different ways we can do that, whether it's online or, I saw something just recently that A24 did for Tony, where they did very, very specific screenings, inviting people who worked in hospitality and doing it on a Monday night because it meant that they could be available, and inviting not celebrity chefs necessarily, but locally respected chefs in each city, and just like having that kind of intentionality and specific thinking around who you want to see this and who's going to champion your work first and foremost, because if you can get them on board, then that will kind of have this ripple effect. Early on talked about this, we didn't actually execute it, but we joked about infiltrating like WhatsApp chats of Filipino aunties and seeing if we could get them to watch Inner and share it with their friends. And it was a joke, one that I would have loved to have actually implemented if we could have. But it was just like the very thinking behind that was like, oh, like where do these people live and how do they communicate? I used to think marketing was so icky and this salesy, pitchy thing that you have to do. But I've been loving and thinking about it as something that can be really fun.
Yeah, and to your point, more bespoke and responsive to the creative. I love that. Rachel, what's your big idea?
Something that I feel really strongly about is there's just so much talent in Queensland. We see it every day. We get the pleasure of working with incredible practitioners, both behind the lens, in front of the camera. It was hard, but it was also easy for us to formulate this incredible team, this alchemy that we speak about. There's so much talent here, and my mum got to watch this show and see herself reflected on screen. And there's the specificity of growing up in Queensland as well, and really having that celebrated sense of place in our work as well. There's just so much of Queensland that I would really love to see on screen, just for people to know that there's a lot going on here. From what I'm noticing and what I've been told by more other, established directors, is that the industry is more risk averse now. Like, we don't have 22 episodes to play with where we can take risks on other directors and writers. We might have 6 at best, or 8 or 10. I think it's a lost opportunity to not take risks on more emerging talent. A lot of us were emerging on this project, and we've managed to make something that is really polished. And, we were talking just the other day about the fact that there might have been an appetite to make it again with a bigger budget, like a longer form or whatever it might be. But the appetite is less there at the moment because it's really good in what it is. And as an online series with the budget that we made, and yes, the blood, sweat and tears that came with that to make it at the level that it is. So yeah, the online space should really be seen as a showcase for talent and for distinct voices. In Queensland alone, there's a lot more filmmakers who deserve to have that risk taken on them. And I just don't think Australia should sleep on that.
Here, as for all the listeners out there, particularly those in positions of power, take some more risks. And I agree with you about Queensland. Queensland IP, let's start backing it. Rachel and Rae, thank you so much. I really hope this episode is something that really sits with people and is a real great example of not waiting for permission to make the work that you need to make for audiences that deserve to be served. It's really opened you up to that opportunity to make something that's so personal, that has such an immediate relationship with audience, and that has had real impact. Inna is free to watch on YouTube right now. We'll put a link in the show notes. Rachel and Rae, it's been such a delight to have this conversation with you.
Thank you so much, Loani.
Thank you so much for having us.
We Interrupt This Broadcast is recorded on the unceded lands of the
Gadigal people of the Eora Nation,
the Turrbal and Yagara people,
the Yugambeh language people,
and the Kaurna people of the Adelaide Plains, and we acknowledge them as the traditional custodians and first storytellers of these regions.
always was, always will be.